Coaching as Benevolence, a podcast for people who are curious about using coaching for self-development. I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings Grief and Loss Coaching.
And I'm L'Shawn with Michelle Sage Place Positive Intelligence Coaching.
All right. Hi, everyone. Today is Monday. We typically record on Mondays. And let's just say I am feeling that it is definitely a Monday with the school year back in session. One kid sick over the weekend. Another kid woke up sick this morning. And it's interesting because before all of this, L'Shawn and I had touched base about the topic of being stuck. And so I'm just going to lay it out on a personal level on why this topic is resonating with me right now is one, because of these external stressors and extra things that happen often with the school year in place that make getting done the work that I need to get done for my business really challenging. And on top of that, last week, I struggled with motivation. I had a lot more time and space in my calendar than I do this week. And I just could not get tasks done. And I think there's something to be said for having breaks and being okay with not doing things constantly. And I think, there's so many spiritual practices that aligns with, and so many health and wellness gurus that aligns with their philosophies as well. So I'm kind of in this space of feeling torn between, being productive, but also taking the space I need to not be productive. Regardless, with both of those, at the forefront of where I'm at, I feel stuck. So today, L'Shawn and I are going to explore stuckness. It's something that happens, like I had mentioned in my own personal life, but it happens a lot with my clients in grief and loss as well, where it feels like we're kind of going in a circular motion or kind of revisiting things consistently that might make someone feel like they're stuck. And I think in the middle of that all, it's a good reminder that even when things are not moving or when things feel really stuck, there's still movement. And I know we've talked about this with like when you float on your back, my friend mentioning that statement, when you float on your back, there is movement even without, you being so goal directed or focusing on things. At the end of the day, I do need to get things done. And I'm struggling. So let's talk about it. Let's find a way to hold both ends of the spectrum of having that balance, but also having that motivation. So L'Shawn, how are you today? And what's resonating you with feeling stuck?
Oh, well, so many things. Like I would say that definitely yesterday was a day of being stuck. After a full day on Saturday of working at this well, it's a big event that my Rotary Club does. It's our annual fundraiser. We partner with the city of Superior, and we do this beer chili fest. And I volunteered to be there the whole day, basically serving beer to the participants there, the people that were participating in the fest. And it took a lot. I mean, it takes a lot out of me. I would say I'm an introvert. I tend to get my energy from being alone, and it drains me to be in contact with people. And I had to be on all day. Like I was on all day, not only with the people who were coming to try this vendor's beer or ale, and just being like a team player, doing what needed to get done, and just having to interact with the public for about 5 hours was draining for me. Plus, it was a very, very busy week. And I don't know what it is about holiday, those long weekends. I mean, in theory, it should be a really great time to rest. And then you've got that 4-day week. So you feel like there's not that much. But no, last week was just full of really emotionally and psychologically draining activities. And so by the time I got to Saturday, I was on fumes and I was on the whole time. So Sunday hits on the couch the whole time. So, and I understand how those days are necessary, and I know how I work, and I know that that's like something that happens, and I knew that that was probably going to happen after having several events and things back to back, that I was going to have one of those days. And I'm like, oh, I'm having one of those days, but it's just such a timely topic, being stuck, and the idea of stuckness is very real and prevalent right now for me. It's like relevant for me right now. That balance between getting stuff done, as you said, Eryn, still need to get stuff done. I have responsibilities and duties and things come up that you just have to get done. And I find that, I push myself, and then when a time comes that I can rest, it's like bam, it's like hitting a wall. And what's really interesting is last Tuesday we had a professional development session with a woman named Avani Dilger, and she has a local nonprofit in Boulder called Natural Highs. And she talks about how we can use herbs like yerba mate tea and passion flower and ginkgo and other herbs as an alternative, a healthy alternative to narcotics, like drugs, not just narcotics, but like nicotine, coffee, um, sugar, that kind of thing. So we had about a 3 hour thing. And one of the things that she talked about was the idea of stress and anxiety that are kind of the same physiologically in the body. And she talks about how our kind of caveman, primitive coping mechanisms for stress, for civilization, when we were in danger, when it was necessary for us to have that adrenaline and to either fight or flight, that fight or flight mode that we were in. What it does is it manifests in our modern civilization as being stuck. So she mentioned like binge watching Netflix, having a day where you just don't move. She said that is your body's way or your mind's way of protecting you. There's a lot of stuff going on, and your mind feels like you are under attack. So you're having the same reaction that you would have if you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or something like that. Understanding that, binge watching Netflix or, having one of those days like yesterday that I had is my body's, that's information saying, hey, you've got a lot of stuff that you are feeling threatened, or you're feeling like maybe overwhelmed. And one of the things that we can do when we're in those situations is movement is good. She said, just moving that energy around. So she said that it's like this stuck energy, and that if you can get in the habit of moving that energy in a healthy way, then you'll have fewer episodes where you're just like, in that situation where you're stuck or feeling like you can't move. So that was really eye-opening for me when I was in that session. And another thing that she mentioned, which was really interesting, like when she talks about addictions, and she says that addiction, there's two parts to addiction. There's a physiological addiction, your body's need for that substance, but there's also the psychological part of addiction, which is ritual. And she talked about how we really don't have a lot of space in contemporary life for conscious ritual. And she did this whole thing where we did this yerba mate tea ritual where we put loose leaf tea in our cup and warm water, not boiling water, but warm water. And then she gave us these metal straws that have like a kind of a sieve at the end of it. The spoon part is like a sieve, and they're called bombillas. And we each got a bombilla and put it in our tea, and we introduced ourselves and talked, and that was like a ritual, and that was something that I was thinking about that might be another way of moving energy, of connecting. Connection's really important too, just having that connection with other people. And then just the nourishing part of the tea, because the tea is really good for the brain. It has all the amino acids that you need for brain health. And just having that as a maybe like a morning ritual, something that we could do with someone or by ourselves, where we're just taking that time to just be gentle with ourselves. So those are some of the things that came up in that professional development meeting that we had with Avani. And it really kind of was something that I was thinking about yesterday. It's like, yep, I'm stuck. I'm in this kind of this, I was too overwhelmed, yes, on Saturday. And so Sunday, I just kind of, I had my moment and I'm like, I can give myself grace and just allow myself that. However, if this happens again, like I can see this happening again, because I have a very full month, lots of stuff going on this month. I will definitely keep that in mind when I'm thinking about giving myself that time so that I don't get to the point where I was on Sunday, where I was just pretty stuck. Any thoughts coming up for you, Erin? I know I took a bit of time there.
No, I love that you brought in your professional development and this idea of the psychological, physiological, and ritual. And I think those are really powerful words for people to hold on to, for our listeners to hold on to as they think about maybe certain things or addictions or other drugs or not, just some things that are facilitating that stuckness for them. So I really appreciate you bringing that part in, and I can definitely use it myself as part of this process of discovering, what's going to be most helpful when we are stuck. And what's interesting too is I knew August was going to be just incredibly busy with work, different engagements, and then school starting. And I had been talking with my therapist leading up to August, saying, looking at my August calendar, it feels like a lot. And so we would touch base. I think we met twice in August to kind of see, how was I doing? And because I was really aware, I actually felt like I was doing just fine. I felt like things were going really well, even though it was had a lot more events that month than usual. Even by the end of the month, when I met with her and we revisited it, it's like, no, things feel really good. But then the first week of September hits and it's like all of this catches up, right? Like, so that's my question too. Like, we might be really self-aware, or we might be really noticing when we maybe are taking on a lot, but it still feels fine. And through it all, it feels okay. But then it's a month or two later when it really starts to catch up to us. And I think the older I get, the more I get that like lapse and it catching up to me. And so I just need to be more curious in thinking about how can I know that, even let's say September is a busy month too, know that it's going to be busy. I might need to have more breaks throughout the month, or I might need to find a way to have more naps or certain things, even though I might be feeling okay. I think there's something to that lends itself to a more meditative practice maybe throughout the day, but also a recognition of, like you talked about, taking that Sunday to say it's okay to have that break. And so how can I fold in that break throughout so that when I do get to October, I'm not feeling completely burnt out like I did last week, where I was really struggling. And I do think that was what contributed to me being stuck last week. I think the lack of motivation was pure tiredness, even though I thought I was so on top of this, right? I had this plan throughout August to check in with my therapist and like really be on top of it all. And it still got me, right? It still really showed up last week. So now I'm sitting here thinking, maybe just always folding in, putting on my calendar where those rest times are, committing to that. And also realizing, like, if my brain, body, soul is saying, wow, this is going to be a busy month, then I should listen to that and say, okay, you had this idea to check in with your therapist to see how it's going. That wasn't the most effective in that, you still felt this like really this I felt this big dip last week in September. So what else can I do maybe to check in with myself each day or each every few days? And I think that your idea or the trainer's idea that provided this professional development of this ritual piece and this community piece. I think those can be really powerful concepts to weave in, not just, once a month, but throughout a month. So, in coaching, it's like, well, what does that look like then? What does that look like for someone who would like to have more of that ritual? For me, I know that I really struggle to start new habits now. I'm learning that through physical therapy right now on a shoulder injury that I've had since high school volleyball. But yeah, as an aside, the physical therapist, he's like, "Are you doing your exercises?" I'm like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "Well, if you're not consistent, then nothing's going to change, right?" And
Mhm.
so I need to have that consistency throughout the month. Yes, with my shoulder, but also it needs to be something that I'm likely going to do. And
Mhm.
it's not a heavy lift that completely changes things in my schedule or takes up a lot of time. And so a ritual, adding that in could be something as small as, once a week or once every 2 weeks, or for some people, a few times a week. It's really just being in tune with where you're at and having no judgment as you implement a new process, being very compassionate with yourself as you try something new and try to implement something. It's so multifaceted and so multi-layered when we talk about those, new habits and the formation of those. And I think, there's science that shows, you do something small, you tie it to something you're already doing in the day, you reinforce that with positive reinforcement. That's one formula, mostly based off of James Clear's work, that seems to work pretty well. But I think that I think this is a very individualized thing too, on what works really well. So, with you using the word ritual, it just really piqued my interest in how can I have a better ritual throughout the month that may support me so that I don't have these highly stuck moments.
Yeah, that's a really good observation there. And I also think about that too, like what rituals can I have in my day that allow me to have those moments of rest, even if it's just like 1 or 2 minutes where you just have a moment where you are really focusing inward and then also giving yourself that opportunity to let go of some of the things that are outside of your control. So for example, if if I'm going through a day where, I feel like I'm just putting out fires, I'm just being reactionary. If I just take a moment to just kind of breathe, breathing is so important when we're giving ourselves that time to reflect or to even address some of those feelings that are coming up. If you're overstimulated or if there's too much going on, gives you a chance to kind of step out of that and maybe observe it with some distance. And I think that just having that as a ritual, where I have a friend who has these alarms that go off whenever there's triple digits, so like 333 or 111, or every time there's triple digits in the clock, she has alarms that go off and she stops everything and she lists 2 or 3 things that she's grateful for. So
Mm.
she is taking that's a ritual for her. And the alarm goes off and she stops and she says, "What am I grateful for? What do I appreciate? What are the positive aspects of my life?" And this really helps maintain that momentum of positivity in her life and also maintaining a light mood for her to have that reminder that there are things in her life that that she loves. And she also has this list of 10 things that just evoke feelings of love and appreciation just by thinking of them. So she has these 10 go-to things that she goes to where she's like, my kitten, or, the different things that just like really bring good feelings for her because she prioritizes feeling good. And so she does everything that she can to weave that into her day. Her daily routine is full of different intentional practices that she does that help her maintain this good feeling about life and about her, her situation. That's not to say that she doesn't have moments of frustration or anger or any of those things, but she looks at those things as like information for like what should I do differently? How can I pivot? She puts that in her daily routine. And so that's one of the things that I think about too, is like if I can look at these days like Sunday where I'm just not moving, I could get up and like I could get the kids. My kids are getting older, so they can usually fend for themselves if they're hungry. I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old. So my 15-year-old, she can fend for herself. I don't really. She'll come and she'll look at me and she'll say, "Mom, there's nothing in the kitchen." And I'll be like, "Are you sure?" Are you sure there's nothing, or is it just that there's nothing you want in the kitchen? I have days like that too. Um, so my son will come and he'll be like, "Mom, I want this or this," and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's go." And then that's the only time that I'm doing anything on Sunday. But I see that as information. That's information of maybe the self-care needs to be adjusted, and then also just kind of thinking about what I can do differently so that when I am in motion, that it's like a healthful motion. It's not just like I'm moving to move or I'm moving to go from A to B, but maybe even if I could like be mindful of moving that energy and being aware of what's going on with myself when I'm in a situation where I might feel like I need extra energy to approach a task or to complete a task. And then once that task is done, just check in with myself and really see, okay, is there still energy in my body that needs to move? Because we it's like a boost, right? It's like a really big boost when we are in a situation where we have a deadline to meet or we've got to think quickly or we've got to move quickly or we've got to get stuff done and there's no rest in between or no time to really think. We get this boost of energy. It's like the adrenaline, it's the all those different chemicals that go into but get pumped into our blood so that we can move, so that we can fight or flight kind of thing. Um, and then we have to, I think it's really important to be aware that we need to be mindful of when those things are over, because I don't know about you, Eryn, but or our listeners, but if you're anything like me, I tend to hold on to that even when it's over. It's like I kind of play it over in my head, probably a trauma response. But like if something happens, for example, I'm in a meeting and it's like really intense and it's done. The meeting's done. Maybe we've resolved whatever it was, but I'm still in my head. I'm still going over in my head, okay, what could I have done differently? What will I do next time this happens? What did I do well? So I'm just going through, and that in itself is bringing up the same emotions. It's like I haven't let it go. So I think one of the things that I'm noticing about myself is that I have a tendency to just go on to the next thing without that self-care in between. Had a meeting, it was intense. Okay, on to the next thing, but not really checking in to see how I'm doing. Like, what's going on in my body? What's going on in my mind? And have I cleansed that? Have I gone through that? Am I entering into the next thing, with a full and charged battery, or I'm entering into the next thing with like half half charged battery or 20% in the battery, that kind of thing. What's coming up for you, Eryn?
Quite a bit in terms of just this idea of like where self-care fits in throughout each day, not only a few days a week or really that mindful piece. And the other thing is you're talking about like how you think about what's going on in the meeting after the meeting. Just the amount of energy I'm sure that takes is a lot, right? So again, that's additional energy spent where we're already at a place where we're overbooked and not having enough energy. So I really am like, why do our brains do this? Why can't we learn our lessons around this? That, it's going to, the more we're aware of it, the more mindful we are, things will shift. And It doesn't always shift, right? And it takes a long time to build out these practices. And I think that's when you're intentional about that, I think there is some growth in that area, right? Where things do shift. And I think that's the power, again, of a coach or a therapist or a thought partner to be able to help you reflect and then figure out what are the changes you could make given your whole lived circumstances as well as your current life context. Because between, all the work that you're doing, L'Shawn, all the leadership commitments, being a mom, all those things add up, right? And being a partner, um, our baskets get really full. There's a lot there to hold. And we're never going to get it right. We're never going to be perfect at this. So, like, taking that pressure off of ourselves, I think, is really invaluable. But also, just being a little bit more reflective about how our brains can continue to, I don't know, rule the energy systems and everything when it's like, wait a second, no, there's a lot more to this here. Um, and I think that the concept of meetings is that's a challenge in itself when it comes to energy distribution, right? And having them back to back to back all day, every day. It's just not probably the most sustainable model there is, but it's often the only model there is available in the workplace, whether that's the corporate workplace, the nonprofit workplace, being a business owner, those types of things. So I think saying no can be helpful as I reflect on my own experience because I like to have a very hearty work life, social life, family life. And I like to go see my family members and like to, do all these extra things in a month
Hmm.
that is just probably too much. So trying to find more ways to say no and listen to myself. And I think, like you said, the trauma response of never listening to ourselves or our bodies, I think that's a big thing for a lot of people because we don't even know what that feels like sometimes or what that sounds like. It's like, no, everything's fine. And it's like, is everything fine? So I guess that's another coaching question that comes up a lot. Like, what is it like to listen to yourself? What does that look like? What does that feel like? Where do you put that part of care into your day? Maybe you tie it directly to brushing your teeth every day, or maybe you tie it directly to maybe a prayer every day, whatever it may be. And then the other thing that is coming up for me here is at church, we're starting a book study on Brother Lawrence's work as far as he was a dishwasher, but met God daily wherever he was. And it's like this contemplative practice of doing less, really, but doing it with God and how healthy this was, as a concept and is as a concept. And I have mixed feelings about this because I'm someone who likes to be in action mode and always doing things. And so when I think back to last week, right, I might be very critical of that, might be judging of that. But at the end of the day, that might have been a more healthy practice than what I'm doing this week, right? And also, especially when I can meet that spiritual source in the moment and just have that reflective, quiet space, I think there's something really helpful for me in this process. And I know as women who are high achieving, we typically put a lot of pressure on ourselves that there's so much to carry, right? There's so much to carry in terms of shifting the norms of, you know, expectations and what women can do and those sorts of things. And I know that's a lot um coupled with race as well, right, L'Shawn? Like
Hmm.
there's probably a lot to hold. So just being gentle again with ourselves, being curious with ourselves. I feel like we always come back to a lot of these same concepts, no matter
Hmm.
what
Yeah.
we're talking about. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, that really resonated with me, what you said about, did you say it was Brother Lawrence or?
Yeah.
Yeah, Brother Lawrence and how he integrates being with God and within his day. And one of the things that came to mind when you were talking about that was the idea of grace and the idea of forgiveness. And I think if you are bringing God into your day, however you see God or however you understand that. I just think of God as this loving and accepting um, force of good that can be very healing and encouraging, I think. And I think if you integrate that into your daily life or whatever you're doing, and you're really bringing to mind that God is here and God is with me, that there is this sense of care that comes with that. That's what came to my mind when you were saying that, like how we can go through our lives with this inner critic that judges everything we do and compares what we're doing with what other people are doing and can really beat us up. It can really be very brutal. But if you can integrate that loving kindness that comes with the idea of God into what you do, it's like a salve to to the effects of the inner critic that just seems to be ever present, and that um, we can minimize or diminish the voice of the inner critic. But I think the more that we amplify the voice of of God and that loving kindness, that really is going to make life so much easier than if we focus on that inner critic, because it's easy to do. It's easy to listen to the inner critic. The inner critic is loud. The inner critic is familiar. Having grown up Mormon, we were always told that the voice of God is soft and it's in a whisper. And so we have to be still to listen to God. And I just think that's so, it's aligned with how we need to be in order to find peace. We need to be still in order to do that. It's not easy to find peace if we're rushing or we are focused on producing or we're goal oriented. It's not easy to find peace when we're doing that. And so when we're still, when we're in nature, when we're taking our time, when we're having a cup of tea, when we're praying, when we're listening to music, those things that like slow us down, I think that's when we can find some peace and also some release from the daily grind of life. How deadlines and meetings and things to do and kids to pick up and so kids to take care of, that kind of thing. So just having that loving kindness and that unconditional love that I associate with God is really healing to think about. And it really resonated with me when you brought that up.
And as you were talking, this idea of stillness, it came like in this vision of the words next to each other, like stuckness can be remediated by stillness, which seems so paradoxical. You'd think that something more opposite of stuckness would be helpful.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I think it isn't this forced shift. And and I guess at the end of my book, I talk about getting stuck in country roads and like you go forward a little bit and backwards a little bit. You don't just ram right through the dirt, mud, country road when you're stuck, right? You actually are gentle. You do a little bit of forward and backwards. And so being stuck is very uncomfortable. It
Hmm.
feels so uncomfortable because it feels like your options are limited. It feels like you're never going to get out of it. It feels like there's no next step. There's no clarity. It's all just this ambiguity. And that's not where we like to live as human beings. We do like more clarity. And I know coaching is all about gaining more clarity. I know that is true. And yet, gaining more clarity requires us to be still in that stuckness, to understand our stuckness, to move gently with it and not forcefully. And so I really like those two words together of stuckness and stillness, and how they're not the same. Stillness is actually a tool for stuckness. So I like how you brought that in.
Yeah. When you mentioned that the stillness next to stuckness and how it seems counterintuitive, I was thinking like going back to that Sunday yesterday when I was on the couch and feeling really guilty about not moving, not doing anything. And it's like, the long list of things to do that I had in my head that was making it difficult for me to just relax and enjoy this time off. One thing that I thought of that came to mind was the idea of in that time of stuckness, if I had just, maybe closed my eyes and just allowed myself to just focus on my breath or do something where I could take that stuckness and turn it into a moment of an opportunity just to get in touch with myself and to just listen to my breathing or something like that, something that I could have done rather than just beat myself up, one
Yeah.
of the things. So it was a exhaling, you're holding your breath, you're holding your breath, you're holding your breath, and you exhale. So when you said that stuckness and stillness, it was like, oh, that was like kind of an aha moment because it was a moment of clarity for me because it made me realize how close those two things are, how close release and how close like healing, the stuckness and the stillness. And it also made me think about perception and how what we call a thing can really determine how we feel about it. So if I call this moment where I'm unable to move or unable to do anything productive, stuckness, that word itself has a lot of weight. But when I say stillness, it's very light. There's light. It's light and it's just really, it feels so nourishing. Stillness, stuckness. And then I think about the two together and how one can easily take that stuckness and call it stillness. And then when you call it stillness, there's this release. It's like, oh yeah, stillness. I could just shift so easily, pivot into stillness in my stuckness. It's great. Thank you for that.
Well, that came from what you had said right before I combined the two. So it was a collaborative
Yeah.
process, for sure. So I guess it's maybe time to circle in on a
Yeah.
coaching nugget of wisdom.
Do you have one
Oh,
in
go ahead.
mind? Do you have one in mind?
I mean, I think the word that's coming up for me is like perspective shifting, and it's exactly what you just said. And it's what effective coaches do themselves, but also what they hope their clients do too, is take on other perspectives. It helps you kind of be a little bit more objective about your situation too. So if you're feeling stuck, come back to the perspective of today's podcast and consider the stillness aspect of it all and what that can bring for you.
What's coming up for me, and I love that you bring this stuckness and stillness and perspective in. What's coming up for me is the idea of grace. And I would like to ask our listeners, what does grace look like for you? What does it feel like for you? And how can you integrate grace into your life as you go through your daily routine? Thanks for joining us for Coaching as Benevolence. I'm LaShawn with Michelle's Sage Place, Positive Intelligence Coaching.
And I'm Eryn with Roots and Wings, Grief and Loss Coaching.
Have a benevolent day.